Hello, bosses, and welcome to today's Career Crush Q&A. I'm Emily Aries, the founder and CEO of Bossed Up, and I am so excited to feature today Joy Haugen, a phenomenal friend of mine, an HR professional, and a career coach with General Assembly in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for being here, Joy.
Thanks so much for having me, Emily. I'm totally stoked to be talking with you today.
Likewise. And as you can see, I'm not in my usual home office. I'm here in sunny and gorgeous Seattle, Washington, for some speaking that I'm doing around the country this week. And thanks so much for those of you who've put up with our slight delay here as we got the tech side up and running. But really, to brief everybody, today's conversation and all of our weekly features with our Career Crush guests really highlight women who have crafted careers with passion and purpose, who I personally have a bit of a career crush on. And the purpose of today's conversation is to give everyone a candid behind-the-scenes look of where and how you got to where you are today, Joy, and some of the lessons learned along the way. And for our bosses who are considering a job change or are looking to take their career to that next level, Joy is such an awesome expert, having been a certified coach, serving as a coach with General Assembly, and knowing the ropes when it comes to HR. So I encourage you all to not only tune in and watch this and share today, but also ask your questions live. So we're monitoring Twitter as well. You can use that hashtag CareerCrush, or you can tweet directly at me at Emily Aries or at BossedUp.org and at Joyful907 to contact Joy and I directly. And both of us love to answer questions even well after this broadcast airs. So if you're watching on our YouTube channel, welcome. And thanks so much for being here. So Joy.
Yeah.
I'm so stoked to have you, lady. So tell us about your role with General Assembly and what you do every day.
Sure. So every day, as you mentioned, I am a career coach with General Assembly, and we have students. We have an immersive program in which people, adult learners, quit their jobs, essentially, quit their lives, and come to General Assembly to learn web development, to learn UX design or data science for 10 to 12 weeks. And through that 10 to 12 weeks, I work with them on how to navigate the job search, because we all know that finding a job is, I think it's actually it's worse than dating, especially in DC. So we really work with them on how do you navigate the job search from a different perspective and setting themselves apart from every other applicant, whether it's in DC, whether it's in Virginia, or whether it's across the country.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. It keeps me quite busy, but I think for me, my overall passion, whether it's with General Assembly, whether it's in my personal life, but I just have a passion for helping people. Yeah. And I think that's something that's been really foundational for me since a child. And I don't want to go too far back into to my life.
Well, I'm going to ask, in just a second, but I wanted to also mention here that this, I forgot to mention at the start that Joy was super foundational to helping us get our Bossed Up Bootcamp program off the ground. And so Joy was and is an active member of the Bossed Up world. She's an advisor on our advisory board, and we love having you, Joy. And some of our bosses have even worked with you directly through Bossed Up Bootcamp, our flagship training program for women navigating career transition. And it's so great to see you continue that kind of work through General Assembly. And I know that some of our alums have gone through GA, have gone through those immersive programs, retooled and pivoted, which I think is really foundational to what we're all about here at Bossed Up too. So I love that. So tell me more about what called you to this work and I know you have a ton of varied and awesome experiences under your belt, but maybe take us through some of the pivot points that you faced along the way in getting here.
Sure. And I do want to start out with how I got to those pivot points. And I think, for me, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of really powerful people in my life. And that's a very intentional decision, both on my part and my parents' part. But there's two people that really helped me set my foundation for who I am today and how I structure both my professional and my personal career. And number one is that my mom, who is an HR professional. Being a single mom, I watched her oftentimes be the only woman on an executive team and having to balance having a really powerful and impactful career, but also wanting to be a really great mom. And, just as we talk about in Bossed Up Bootcamp, there is that challenge of how do I be really great at both? Because I think, Emily, as you say, when you show up to work, it's not like when you walk in the door that your home life goes away, and vice versa. So because of her, I've really grown up in the environment of that your career is, at least for me, my career has been really important to me, and I've had a lot of focus on that. On the flip side, I've also been able to see just how important it is to be grateful and appreciative of what you have. Another person who has really set the tone for who I am is my uncle, Tom Eklund, and he runs a nonprofit organization in the Dominican Republic in Nicaragua. And he quit his job as an executive at IBM to start this organization. And I was very fortunate to be able to go down on mission trips starting at a very young age. And so through that experience, I got to see the other side of life. I got to see what it's like for children who don't have the toys, who don't have the food, who don't know what they're going to be able to do tomorrow, next month, next year, or even just the thought of being able to go to school. And so since then, that organization itself has grown to over 20,000 volunteers, really structuring the educational system. And I think for me, that's really helped to develop my passion for helping people. And in my way, so how that's translated to my life, I love to help people in transition in their life and really get to a life that they love. So when we talk about those pivotal transitional points in our careers, I've always been very cognizant of the people side. And with my HR background, my first job out of college, I was in a management training program where I essentially switched jobs every 6 months and having to learn new tools, new tactics. But with each of those rotations, I was really focused on the people and how do we make it work for everyone involved so that the people training, people like myself who are brand new and are only there for 6 months get benefited out of it. And we as the people who are learning can actually learn in that short amount of time. And
what an awesome opportunity just to have that kind of, like a fast-paced, learn on your feet type environment. It makes so much sense that you've become so agile and structures oriented, right? Coming up with systems that support everybody. I love it.
Yeah, and so I really enjoyed that aspect. To your point, it was fast-paced. You're always learning. I had to make some tough decisions. I was confronted very early on with some tough decisions of like, how do we make this business better? How do we make the most of not only the organization's funding, but how do we best support the people? And I did that for about 4.5 years, and I moved around across the country. And through that experience, I had my friends would reach out to me and send me their resume, and they would say, hey, you're in HR. Can you look at my resume? How do I get a job? And I would help them, and I loved being able to help them. But I got a little bit of an imposter syndrome, and I felt like a fake because I'm like, who am I to be telling you what to do with your life? And I'm glad that it's working out, but it might just be a fluke, and somebody is going to find out at some point in time that I'm just kind of faking it until I make it. And so at that point, I was really wanting to make a change, and I thought, what's my next step career-wise? And for me, I loved living in Washington, D.C. So I came back to D.C. and I took a job leading a college recruiting program for a systems engineering company, and really, really enjoyed it. But at that point, I was really focused on the people as well. But I said, again, I feel like I'm still kind of at that level of being a little bit of a fraud. So I'm not ready to make that decision to go back to school.
Right.
But I want something in between, and what's going to allow me to continue to focus on the people, which has been my passion since I was a child. And I went through a coaching certification program that's based out in LA, and really the foundation of that program is how do you live your best life, whether that's professionally, personally, what does that look like for you? And being an adult, and we talk about this through our General Assembly coaching, is when being an adult learner is very different than learning in academia. And so we've had a lot of years under our belt to live our life. We've gotten really accustomed to being comfortable with how do we structure our day? How do we, what's our job? What's our relationship with our money? Who are we waking up to, if anybody? And it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to say, I want to make a change. And nobody can make that change except for yourself.
Right.
And it's so scary, and you start to feel alone. And so I really wanted to say, how can we best support people who continue to want to make a change in their life, so that they don't wake up when they're 90 and realize, I lived the same year over and over again, and I just don't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so that's been my primary focus with my coaching is, what is it that you really want to do with your life?
Right.
And having that game plan so that you know that you can do one little thing every single day to get closer to your dream.
Right. And I feel like everyone tuning in has to see how obvious it is that you, Joy, made such an amazing addition to our team at Bossed Up, to Bossed Up Bootcamp, and that you continue to do so as an advisor. Because it's so funny how I feel like a lot of us are struggling with this right now, right? There's so much turnover in the workplace, in the environment that we exist in today, in today's economy, that it's this new normal of high volatility. And we're starting to have to relearn how to be vulnerable, how to be agile, how to be lifelong learners. It's a necessity in the economy that we exist in. And I love seeing General Assembly take a really technical approach to solving that problem, which reminds me of your last position too, which was helping engineers, right, do the same kind of work.
Yes.
What do you think about, and this is sort of a curveball question, it's coming out of the field, but I wonder what your thoughts are on gender as it fits into all of this, right? Because we work a lot with women at Bossed Up, and you've been a big part of that. Women in sales continue to face sort of bro culture or bro grammar culture, and I think also continue to have in the past faced a bit of a pipeline problem. Although I would argue that there's been such an effort around getting more women into STEM fields that now it's maybe not a pipeline problem, maybe it's a culture problem. What do you see as some of the, and maybe your experience is different, right? Do you see lots of women coming through the doors at GA? And amongst those who do, what do you see helps them be successful in particular? And if I'm just seeing gender where there isn't a gender issue, let me know. But I see gender, I see the whole world through a gendered lens these days.
Well, Emily, I think you're right. I think there still is a gender problem. I think it's a little bit of both. It's still a little bit of a pipeline, but there's so much more focus on STEM and education and getting women in the door. So I think we have, even since Bossed Up has been around, which I think you've been a huge part of that, but I think there's been major strides in fixing that.
Yeah.
And adding to the conversation of why it's so important for women to be at the table.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think it really, though, boils down to that we do not know what we bring to the table. We do not know how to sell our strengths. Yeah. And so when we think about the job search process, and, for I'm sure you are familiar with like the whole marketing cycle.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, we in the marketing cycle, we start with our objective, and then you have to go through, your research stage and your communications plan, and then you actually put your execution. And you figure out, did you meet your objective or did you not? And that's equivalent to the job search. And so we often think, okay, I'm ready to make a switch. I want a new job. So we go right from that objective field. So my objective is to get a new job. And most often we go right to execution. So I'm just going to put my resume out there and hope that somebody in that black hole looks at it and says, oh, yeah, maybe I should talk to this person. And what we fail to do is we fail to do the research and putting the communications plan together. And those two components are so important to do, because we really take that focus on who are we and what we bring to the table. And as women, if we don't know how to own our own talents and our own skills, how are we going to tell an employer this is the impact that I'm going to make in your organization.
Right.
Here's how I'm going to make you money. And so I think we as women need to be okay with here's what I am, and take a stand for our greatness.
I love it. I'm like feverishly tweeting out quotes from what you're saying, just so you know, if I'm looking off screen. But I just love that metaphor between how to execute a good project or market a good project and how to market yourself, because it makes so much sense as to why I love marketing and I love helping people find their next dream job, right?
Yeah.
And it really is about like putting in your time between that objective and execution to do your research and get your marketing ready, right? Because it's, I feel like the barrier is low to doing so, but the psychological barriers are still there, like you're talking about. Yeah. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the systemic injustice that still exists. It's not exactly an easy thing to fix, but it's an important thing to mention, I think, because we still live in a world in which bossy women, no matter how well you market yourself, might be less well received than assertive men. And that I'm encouraged by the conversation that's starting to change that reality, but it is that kind of, it's important to notice, I think, that combination of like, here's what you can do about this. You can personally, negotiate and be assertive and get your marketing ass together, right? Like get it all online, but also sometimes the world is just not just. And so there's that piece as well. Very cool.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that we're all fighting. We all have our own Goliath in our head. We're all fighting up against that voice that says we're not good enough, we're not capable of, there's somebody else out there that is going to do it better, so why do it at all? Right. And I think in DC especially, like we are surrounded by a lot of talented and strong people, and especially women. And so I think it's so easy for us to say, well, Emily, she's already conquering it, so why should I even join the conversation? Or somebody else is going to do it better than I can. So it's important to take that step back and really acknowledge that you have your own unique gifts and talents that you bring to any situation and any conversation. So being okay being comfortable to hear your own voice and to know your own talents is so important.
Right. And I feel like that's a lifelong struggle for most of us. It's about self-worth. It's about self-acceptance in the face of inevitable failure. Definitely, right? Like there will always be moments in our lives when we don't get what we want. And that's when we have to make sure that our core sense of self and identity are still intact. So we've got a comment here from Tracy who's watching and says, listen, in 5 years, I've had 4 jobs. And it concerns me since 2 of them were layoffs. And so I think she was speaking directly to that moment when we were talking about the volatile nature of today's economy. What do you think about that? Is that something you see happening often? Are those numbers concerning to you from an HR perspective? How does she manage that kind of a perception in her next interview process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think whether it's not an unfortunate, I mean, yes, it sucks to be laid off. But it's thinking about, again, focusing on what are the impacts that you bring to the table. So before you were laid off, I'm sure you learned stuff and you brought stuff to the table. So focusing on the positive, what were those impacts? What did you actually do? And so often, especially when we're thinking about our resume, we get so caught up in how are they going to know what I did or what I'm capable of if it's not on my resume. And at the same time, we get so caught up in talking, and I say, I can Google the organization. I cannot Google you and the impacts that you made. So when you're writing your resume, you're making sure that your bullets or your summary is really highlighting what did you bring to the table? What impacts did you make? And then when you're telling your story, you're focusing on, the organization, that higher level of what are you capable of? Because, unless we're really true job hoppers and it's like every 6 months we're like going every which direction, like, if you can work on your story and say, here's who I am, then we're not going to be so focused on those dates and the layoffs. We're going to be focused on, you as the talent, because as an organization, more and more organizations are moving to behavioral interviewing. And what that means is I want to know what you're capable of. I want to know what you're going to do for me. And how I know that is based off of what your past experience and your past performance. And so, highlighting what you actually did, what you do in your job, what are those impacts?
Yeah, I love that. And I can't
Yeah.
you're reading my mind again, Joy, which is a thing that you do often. And part of the reason I love you and I love this relationship. But I am currently finishing up a video that is going to be released tomorrow, all about the power of your personal story for the purposes of job interviews or connecting with an audience that you're speaking in front of. And just like you're saying, it's so critical to show them what you care about, what you're capable of, and then make that connection, right, between your interests and their interests, and making that, I go into more detail. I'll put it on the Bossed Up blog tomorrow, and for all of our email subscribers, you'll get it right in your inbox, so make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. But a brand new, less than 5-minute video on that topic, because personal story, as you've already illustrated today, is the foundation of connection, and vulnerability is a big part of that too.
Exactly.
But do you feel like there's a hard and fast rule now? I remember there's in terms of how long you have to stay at a job, because I've had more than one person say to me, listen, I took this job, it was a totally toxic environment, and now I'm stuck here. I have to make it to the 1-year mark, or I have to make it to the 2-year mark before I can reclaim my power in life and take it back. What do you think about those rules, and are they still relevant in today's workforce?
I would say yes and no. No job is worth being miserable. My first job, going back to that management training program, I loved the people. I hated what I did, and I hated it so much that I got physically sick. And I remember I went to the emergency room, and I was glad that I had a kidney infection, because that meant that I was in an ER and I didn't have to go to work. And so no job is worth your health. No job is worth being miserable. And so when we talk about that time frame, it's not a matter of how long do I have to stick it out for. It's what control do you have over the situation. So if you know that you just need to get out, so what are you going to do? What's one thing every single day that you can do to get closer to getting out of that job? So it's updating your resume, it's updating your LinkedIn profile, it's networking, it's it's utilizing who is in your back pocket, who is in your power tribe to say, hey, can we have an informational interview? It's cold calling people on LinkedIn to say, hey, I see your background and it's super cool. Can we have coffee?
Yeah.
And just getting to know people and almost creating the job that you would love. Because go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Finish.
I just think when we go back to that marketing cycle of from the point of the objective to the execution phase, by doing the research and the communications plan, we're creating a process that we're aligning the jobs to us. We're not aligning ourselves to the job, because we know that we can't possibly please everyone.
Right.
And there's no way that, and we say the shittiest way to feel about yourself is to look at a job description, because an organization is writing for that perfect candidate. They're writing for the unicorn, what is Santa going to bring me on Christmas morning, because I need my candidate to have all 20 skills. And we know as human beings that that's probably not realistic. We're not going to be able to match all 20 skills really well.
Right.
So when we're job searching, it's being cognizant of what are we capable of? What can we do? What talents do we have? And then at the same time, not making the decision for somebody else whether we're qualified or not. Because the worst that they can do is say no. Mm-hmm. But if we cannot do that one thing every single day, if we cannot put our resume out there, if we cannot say to, even our closest network of, hey guys, I'm really miserable in my job and I need to get out. Can you help me?
Yes.
And, it's being able to ask for help, which goes back to that gender issue. As women, we are not good at asking for help.
Right.
And so,
oh my God.
Yeah.
I feel like, Joy, first of all, you've rattled off a ton of really key topics. I just have to highlight that we've covered on our YouTube channel and that are covered all the time on the Bossed Up blog. So if you want to learn how to have those informational coffee meetings, check out our most recent Ask Emily video on our YouTube channel. All that content around refreshing your resume, refreshing your LinkedIn profile, asking to expand your networks. Check out the resources we have on our YouTube channel and on Bossed Up's blog, but really, this is why Bossed Up exists, as you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we do the work that we do, is because no one should have to go through that really scary, uncertain process of figuring out how to get out of that toxic work environment alone. And that's why I encourage anyone who's watching this right now who feels that way to join us at Bossed Up Bootcamp. It is the flagship program that started it all, and it's the one that we're doing in New York, Boston, and DC this year, all throughout the rest of the year. You can apply at bossedup.org/bootcamp right now, and you'll hang out with people like Joy and I, and expert trainers, and a community of women who are going to help you make that leap like a boss. Yeah. So, Joy, I can't believe it, but we are just about out of time. I could talk with you forever, obviously, but a couple of things. One, share with us how we can keep up with you. So for folks listening who want to get to know you better, want to friend you or LinkedIn with you, let us know where we can find more details. And then any last thoughts or words of encouragement or advice for those who are here today to find out where to go next in their career?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, so one of my goals is to really get my personal website up to date. So in the meantime, you can connect with me old-fashioned wise of joy.haugen@yahoo.com. I'm happy to help, happy to have a conversation with identifying those next steps. In terms of, what's next for you and where can you find that next step, is to really just think big, pie in the sky. What's the life that you would love? And not let the current constraints of your current situation, your current life, dictate that story. Because anything is possible, and you are in the driver's seat of making that a possibility. And so not just to take firm action and know that you have a community through Bossed Up and elsewhere of people who are willing to support you in getting to that life that you're going to love.
Awesome. I could not have said it better myself. You and I have to talk about your website too, because I can help with that.
Yes.
And General Assembly, amazing resources for anyone looking to retool and beef up their technical expertise and work with badass coaches like Joy. What's the website? Is it generalassembly.ly?
Yes, there you go.
Okay. So it's General Assembly, but with a little dot before the LY. And that's the site you should go check out to sign up to learn more about all their STEM classes in DC and around the country, if not world.
Yes, we have 15 campuses around the world, and we do nighttime workshops and part-time courses and immersive courses, which you get the coaching aspect from. So highly encourage you to check us out.
Awesome. Joy, thank you as always. Ladies, thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you found today's conversation insightful, inspiring, instructive. If you haven't already, get on over to bossedup.com, join our email list. It is the #1 way to get all the best information that we send out, and make sure you're invited to future Career Crush conversations like this one. And do us a favor, invite some gal pals to join you, because bossing up is always better with besties like Joy. All right, y'all, have a good rest of your week. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you then.